Buenos dias, Internet bikers. What you see here is my Yamaha Midnight Star 950. I think in the US it's called the Yamaha V-Star 950. Maybe it could be called the Midnight Star as well. I know in some markets, also here in Europe, it's called the XVS 950A. And I'm showing you this bike because it is now 14 years old and it is working same as it has been from day one. And that's what I want to talk about today. I think these bikes, not just this one, not just the Yamahas, but also the Kawasaki's, the Suzuki's, and of course the Hondas of this era, I think they're unbreakable. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. Going to make a case for them.
Alright, so let's begin with why I have this bike, because it's always important for everyone to have clarity on what it is that you are expecting from a motorcycle. I bought this bike 14 years ago, and my whole purpose for it was to get to know Spain. So this is where I live, right? I live in Spain, and this is the Spanish landscape that you are seeing. So that's why I bought it. I figured I was going to use this bike in my free time when I arrived in this country. I'm not originally from here, but when I arrived here, I figured, since I like bikes, you know, a motorcycle would be a pretty good way to get to know this country. I needed something that was comfortable, that I could do long distances with. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that I needed a cruiser, but honestly, back then, 14 years ago, I had very limited knowledge about motorcycles. I honestly thought that if you wanted to do long distance riding, the cruisers were the only option. So I never really investigated much. All I knew is, in my limited understanding, all I knew is I needed a cruiser. And mostly based on looks, I chose this one from the ones that existed back in the day, which were the Honda Shadows, the Suzuki Intruders, or over here in Europe they've always been called Intruders, but I think in the US they're called Boulevards, and the Kawasaki Vulcans, right? So based on looks, this is the one that I liked a little bit better, and this is the one that I got. But overall, they're all the same, right? They have the same quality. They have the same look and feel, more or less. They work the same pretty much. So I think when I talk about this bike, I am talking about Japanese cruisers from a relatively recently bygone era. I think only a few of them are still sold in the US. Absolutely none of them are still sold here in Europe. I can't get this bike new. I don't think you can get it new anywhere, but I think you can still get some Suzuki's and Hondas for new in the US. Maybe Kawasaki's, I don't know. You guys let me know. So that's the reason I bought it. And with that objective in mind, it completely fit the bill. I fulfilled all the objectives. I've gone all around the country. Don't quote me on this, but I think Spain is more or less a little bit bigger than Texas.
All right, I'm going to have to cut myself off right here because Spain is actually smaller than Texas. It's just as big as Nevada and Utah put together, so it's still a big chunk. And the distance, if you go coast to coast through northern Spain, it's about as far as Chicago to Washington. So you still need a pretty good 12 hours to ride coast to coast. But it is a little bit smaller than Texas.
And I believe it is a lot more varied than Texas, because there's a lot more coastline and there's a lot more mountains. So that makes the riding a little bit more diverse, right? Northern Spain is, when it comes to weather, it looks the same as Ireland, and there's even cliffs above the sea. So or that jut out directly to the sea. Yeah, well, Spain is more or less that size. It's a relatively large country for European standards. It's nowhere near as big as many other countries, but for Europe, it's a big one. And so, like I said, I did northern Spain, I did central Spain, I did eastern, west. The only thing I didn't do was southern Spain. That's the only place I didn't go. I also went to Portugal, which is to the west of Spain. I also went to France, which is to the north of Spain. We did the Pyrenees. So I did all of that in this motorcycle. It absolutely fulfilled the expectations, and I have around 50,000 miles on it, which I know is not a lot, right? 50,000 miles is taking it easy for this type of motorcycle. But I do know, I have a friend of mine who has a Kawasaki Vulcan that has 200,000 miles on it. I know that you can put hundreds of thousands of miles on these bikes. You can take them anywhere, and you can take them through hot and cold, because people will always say, aren't they air cooled? How does that work in the summer? Yeah, I mean, it's not exactly the most comfortable ride in the summer, but the bike is never going to overheat. It can do summer, and it can do big hot Spanish summer, which I have done many times, right? So I put all those miles on it, always with, well, not always, but in most cases with my wife riding pillion. At first, when I bought the bike, I wasn't married, and I did a few trips on my own, but then I got married, and yeah, she's done, I would say, maybe 40,000, well, maybe not 40, but at least 30,000 miles with me on the bike. And it's always been one of the big selling points of these types of motorcycles is how comfortable they are to ride pillion. In fact, one of the very few things that I've changed to this bike is, well, apart from the paint job, because it was a lot of chrome, so as you can see, the handlebar is blacked out. I have a few blacked out things like this cover over here. It was completely chromed, but blacked it out. Yeah, I blacked out a few things. I put the Mustang seats on it. I put some saddlebags, and I put the windshield. I used to have a handlebar mounted windshield. Now I put a fork mounted windshield. They're all good, all helpful. And yeah, apart from all of that, I think everyone does that to these motorcycles. I mean, you always do some sort of accessorizing, because not everyone needs them for the same thing, and not everyone likes exactly the same look. But that is one of the good things that these bikes have, right? You always have a lot of accessories available. So that's one of the good things. And yeah, you can more or less make it fit your style or your expectations. So I did that, and we rode a lot, and she loves this bike. You may know that I also I've sold it now, but I had a Triumph Tiger 900 GT Pro, which is an adventure bike. She said that even though she could handle it, she would always prefer to ride this one. This one was always more comfortable for her. So yeah, that's something that they have going for them. I think that's more or less my story with the motorcycle. It has never broken down, not once. After 14 years, 50,000 miles, and after spending, this is important, after spending 8+ years out in the street, because I lived in the city, and I just, I mean, I put a cover on it, but it was out in the street. I mean, it would be 100 degrees 100 degrees Fahrenheit, or 40+ degrees Celsius. It would be freezing, or even below freezing, and everywhere in between. And this bike was just out in the street. The only thing that I can say that has had some effect is that now I start to see a few bolts here and there that are a bit rusty and that probably need to be changed. But yeah, I mean, after 14 years, I know that if you do that in a Chinese bike from the same era, yeah, they wouldn't last a couple years. They wouldn't last 2 or 3 years of that. They would just decompose, basically. That's just the Japanese quality for you right there, right? There is just no better quality than a Japanese bike from a bygone era, because I mean, everything here is, most of it is metal anyway. I don't think that's the case anymore. The build quality of these bikes from, I would say, between 2000 and 2015, more or less, I think those are the bikes that I'm talking about. And I think They are absolutely the best motorcycles you can buy on the cheap second hand right now. They are very cheap. They are always working perfectly. And one very important detail is most people ride them like I ride, right? Well, I mean, that was not intended right there. But most people ride like I ride. I mean, we ride slow, we ride careful, we take care of the motorcycle. I guess one of the few bad things you can say about these motorcycles is that they're not the best for twisty roads such as the ones that I'm riding through today. They're just not as great to move around. I mean, they give you a little bit of a workout because you kind of have to muscle them through the corners. You don't have to do that with more modern bikes, like naked bikes, sport bikes, or adventure bikes. You don't have to muscle them around. You just point and they go, right? Not these guys. Cruiser motorcycles are a little bit more difficult to move through the corners. I've always thought of it as driving a van versus driving a sedan, or a regular coupe. Driving a cruiser motorcycle is like driving a van. I mean, you can have fun driving a van, but you're not gonna do fast speeds, and you're not gonna be the best one through the corners. You're not gonna be the fastest one through the corners. You may not enjoy it as much, and it's gonna be a little bit more muscular. But hey, you can enjoy vans. Why not? I mean, people race trucks, so you can enjoy anything. But yeah, moving these bikes around the curves, not as great, especially when you know how it is with those other motorcycles. They're a little bit slower through the curve. They have a lot more weight, a lot more mass to move around. So yeah, but because nothing's perfect, and these guys are not meant for canyon curving. They're meant for mile munching, right? It's a different concept, a different objective that they are designed for. And you know what? For running down the miles, they're amazing. So overall, I'd have to say that after 14 years, 50,000 miles, and 8+ years of sleeping out in the cold and the hot in the street, this bike is still running pretty well. It runs smoothly. I don't have to take it to the shop for anything other than basic, maintenance, oil changes, tire changes. Other than that, I've never taken this bike to the shop for anything. I mean, it really is amazing. It's really good. Now, this is also what you would expect from quality brands, and of course, the big four Japanese brands are top quality brands. So it's not surprising, but it is good. It's always good to have that reassurance. And this is my experience. My experience is this bike is amazing, and there's really not much that I need to do to keep it running. I mean, the only thing that I've had to change seriously is that I've had to replace the battery maybe 3 times already. Of course, because I leave it out, and sometimes I use it all the time, and sometimes I leave it out in the street for 2 months without even looking at it. And so yeah, when I come back, you know what? Time to change the battery. So other than that, I've never had absolutely any issues with this motorcycle. Still running, still working perfectly, still looking great. And that's why I say, if you're looking to get into motorcycling and you're not exactly about the fast boy lifestyle, if you just want to, cruise around, maybe you don't have the budget for a new cruiser, and or you just want something more comfortable for a relatively budget price that you can't get anymore, because they're not in many markets. You can't get anything new like this anymore. Yeah, I think a second-hand old Japanese cruiser is a very, very safe bet. It's a very safe bet because we all take care of these bikes. They're never run badly, or when I say that, I mean we never push them, right? They can do much more than what we ask of them. And that means, and also because Japanese brands, the Japanese mentality has always been to build vehicles so that they always run, right? They always run, and that's what this. For me, I am just confirming that definitely they always run. I mean, this bike always runs. It just never breaks. So yeah, and they are very cheap right now. There you have a ton of them. I think both in Europe and the US, they're very easy to get. They're very cheap, and they're all well taken care of. So I would say, hey, if you're thinking about it, go for it. You're not gonna regret it. These bikes they just work. All right, so that's all I wanted to say, guys. Now I'm gonna stop here in this town, which I really love. I'm gonna get some coffee, and I'll see you guys later. Hasta luego.